ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Entrepreneur India for inviting me to such a timely convention of MSMEs with its aptly chosen theme of Vision 2020, Priorities, Building an Ecosystem for Entrepreneurship. I'm also reminded of what our Prime Minister says when he mentioned the government must nurture an ecosystem where the economy is primed for growth and growth promotes all-round development, where development is employment generating and employment is enabled by skills, where skills are synced with production and production is benchmarked to quality, where quality means global standards and meeting global standards drives prosperity. Most importantly, this prosperity is for the welfare of all. This is the overarching vision that ties India to the world without losing sight of what needs to be done back home on skills, jobs, and creating more entrepreneurs. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was listening to Ritu, I was also reminded of what our Honorable Minister, Shri Kalrajji Mishra says. While Ritu mentioned that the entrepreneurship really started around 1980s when things started opening up in the country, our Honorable Minister always mentions that entrepreneurship was always the hallmark of India. Around the time when India was considered to be Sone ki Chidiya, he mentions that everybody from the kumhar to the carpenter to the plumber, everybody was an entrepreneur in those times. Ladies and gentlemen, I was also listening to recently a video clip on YouTube of Mr. Shashi Tharoor when he was talking about how the colonial system made an impact and literally crushed the Indian industry, the Indian entrepreneurs around that time. But well, that is history and we live in the present. And today, when we have a real look at what the country comprises of, I'm again reminded of what our Honorable Prime Minister says. Amongst the Ds which he mentions, one of the D is the demographic dividend. That demographic dividend, while it is a big boon for the country, it is also a challenge. And recently when they were unveiling the skill mission and with the Minister for Entrepreneurship and Skill Development, our Honorable Prime Minister said that the youth of our country, if it is not harnessed properly, would be a big challenge for us. And when we look at the situation, we definitely look at entrepreneurship as a solution. But then, when we look at the situation, not solution, situation, we find that majority of our demographic dividend, which is considered people in the age group of 18 to 59, they are 53% having education of below the 5th grade or 8th grade level. It's only 2% of the population which is really educated of graduation and above. And that is what really makes me think when I visit a place like Devriya or Ghazipur, and when I meet my fellow entrepreneurs in places like Delhi and the other cities, there is a world of difference between the two. It is basically we need to address both these areas if we have to find a complete solution for our country. But then, even what we are doing, look at the sector in the MSME. It's a huge sector, maybe over 4 crores we have in the total sector, but then the registered entrepreneurs would be only about 16 to 17 lakhs. That's again a big challenge. When you look at the Global Entrepreneurship Index, India ranks at 104 and it has gone down 13 places from 2014. And it is even below countries like Gambia, Benin, and Liberia. But what goes into all these things? What are the basic pillars which really count for it? And if you look at certain pillars as to where we are falling short, one of the pillars is the opportunity for startup. And India scores only 0.11, indicating that most of the startups are out of necessity, not out of opportunity. This needs to be addressed. If the country is really opening up and there are opportunities, there should be an ecosystem which really encourages these entrepreneurs, these startups to come forward. Another yardstick on which we are being measured is the internationalization score, where our score is 0.12. And we would all agree that most of the ventures in India find it difficult to cross the borders of the states, leave aside the country. So that's another big challenge which we need to address. And another pillar is the technology adoption, where again India scores 0.11. Despite being a major exporter of IT services, we are nowhere when it comes to using the best technologies. We are always indulging in more of jugaad. So these are some of the challenges which really come up. But then, having had the challenges, we also need to create an ecosystem whereby we have more of these entrepreneurs, and especially looking at that part of India, which really is a different world altogether. Places like Devriya, Ghazipur, and the others which are there all across the country. And especially that part of our population which could not get the proper education, where I say 53% is below the middle scale of the education. Even it was being mentioned the other day when we were talking about skills, only 2% of the Indian workforce has proper vocational training. Whereas in countries like others, like Korea, the minister said it is 96%. So these are some of the challenges if we have to really address them. But then, if we have to create more entrepreneurs, we must make an ecosystem which makes it easy for them to start and also to sell whenever they feel like. We must look at the World Bank report on ease of doing business, where India stands in 2015 report at 158, going down 2 notches from 156, which was earlier. And if you look at certain things which are very important, dealing with construction permits, we are at 184, getting electricity 137, registering property 121, trading across borders 126, enforcing contracts 186, resolving insolvency 137. The only 2 areas where we are reasonably good is getting credit, where we stand at 36, and protecting minority interest, where we stand at number 7. Despite standing at 36 in terms of credit, the biggest challenge which most of the entrepreneurs face is how to get the credit. And that is another thing which we need to look upon. And one of the solutions which I'm sure you are going to discuss during the day is to have the funds flowing easily to the Indian entrepreneurs. And then only you will have a very encouraging ecosystem of entrepreneurship creation. We also need, when I was mentioning that the vocational trained people are only 2% of the population, we also need to teach entrepreneurship in the school and college level. And I'm sure Mr. Agarwal, through the Ministry of Entrepreneurship and Skill Development, as well as the HRD Minister, would be addressing these concerns, because we need to catch them young and we need to train them in making them come forward. We also need to cultivate a culture of embracing failures. You know, people are very scared. What happens if we fail? And because we do not have a good exit mechanism, the Ministry of MSME is coming out with an exit policy also. But till the time it gets in place, and if we do not have that, people are very scared. And that, what happens? Failure becomes a social stigma. We need to address that. And that happens when we share the success stories and also the stories of various big entrepreneurs having failed down the course where they have traveled. And in this regard, I am reminded, our award sponsors, Airtel, Mr. Mittal, he was, at one point in time when he started, was importing generators. And suddenly the policy of the government didn't permit generators to come in. And he says, I had nothing to fall back upon. But then he again mentions he went to Taiwan and suddenly came across these telephones and all that and started. And see, having faced failure, where Mr. Mittal is today. So it is not that failures don't come in. They have to be shared. It is also Dr. Murthy of Infosys. For 18 months, there was nothing. His company was Softronics. Nothing happened. But then the man changed tracks and came up. And look at where Infosys is today. Let me also share with you the story of NSIC, the company which I head. NSIC, despite having been set up in 1955, almost around 2000, we were at a situation where we had almost, by the decisions of certain people, lost everything. Our net worth, which was over 232 crores, got reduced to only 27 crores. But then we didn't give up. Team NSIC had a firm resolve that we are going to come back. And today, NSIC did a business of 20,000 crores in 2015 year closing. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is the successes. And a point which I would like to make very vociferously, it is that we need to recognize the successful superheroes in our entrepreneurship world. I would, through this day and through this conference, urge upon the media, my friends like Arnav Goswami and others, that they must bring about success stories on their main channels. And I was listening to Ritu when she quoted a few foreign entrepreneurs who are very successful. I would also like to share some of the Indian successful entrepreneurs who have made big. And let me tell you, I'm always reminded of what our most respected Shri Brijlal Munjalji said when he visited our exhibition ground in Delhi. NSIC has an exhibition ground in Okhla. When he came, he said, I am reminded of the times when my first pipe bending machine for making of bicycles I took from NSIC. Ladies and gentlemen, this was way back, I think, in the 50s or the late 50s. I'm sure Mr. Munjal carried a vision that he would be big one day. And we are so very proud that he could do it and make the entire country proud when hero is the name world over. And there would be many successful entrepreneurs who would have traveled the distance all these years. But then we need to bring them out and bring them to the fold and recognize them. We have a whole media covering Ajinkya Rahane when he becomes the captain for the first time of the Indian cricket team. But there is no mention of any good entrepreneur who comes out with a technology which is very relevant for our times, or an entrepreneur who has made it so big, having started small. That is what needs to be encouraged. But in this situation, ladies and gentlemen, I will also take a little bit of your time in sharing with you my company, because we are there to facilitate anything and everything which a budding entrepreneur requires, which a young enterprise requires, and we enable them to scale up the journeys from the beginning to till the time they can stand on their own and move ahead and become very big. We divide our entire schemes and operations into 4 broad categories, the biggest and the first one being the marketing. It's always a challenge when we discuss whether credit is a bigger issue or marketing is a bigger issue. We do not discriminate between any of them. When we say that marketing is as big an issue as credit is, and therefore, we also consider technology and support services to be there, what are required for an entrepreneur. It's a complete hand-holding process which we take an enterprise through any point in time, any services they require. The biggest challenge for an enterprise who is into manufacturing is that they don't get raw materials. a young entrepreneur will have to fathom for themselves, fight with the dealers and traders, whereas we aggregate them, take their quantities, pool them, and talk to the bulk manufacturers, getting them the prices, the same prices which the bulk manufacturer sells at, eliminating the dealers and traders, and getting them the quantity discounts. Any material which you require, we bring you together, and that is what we do it. Well, be it the steel, be it aluminum, be it copper, be it zinc, be it anything which you require, and that is what we do. Having produced, the problem comes, where do we sell it? Government has come up with a very good scheme of public procurement. We have been registering all these units with us since 1976. And through a third-party inspection, we certify the competence and capacity of those units. We are trying to get as many orders as possible, because this year is the year when we are going to have public procurement as the biggest business we would be doing after raw materials and credit. So we get the orders for the small enterprises, farm it out to them, arrange the raw material for the suppliers, and see that the ball keeps rolling. We would also like to expose them to the markets world over so that Indian entrepreneurs do not get them confined to the boundaries of our country. Also, we form consortiums of these units, small units, because we believe a small enterprise cannot fathom for itself alone. They have limited capacities. That is where we bring them together, and I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's a big challenge. Bringing competitors together is the biggest challenge which we have, but then we are very successful. Last year, we could form 102 consortiums all across the country. And now we are getting them orders for them to serve as per their production capacities. Credit is always a difficulty. Raw materials, we provide them on credit. We have also tied up with 31 banks and financial institutions to provide them the credit of any value, any nature, and the biggest factor is we do not charge anything from these small enterprises. This service we render free of cost. And let me tell you, last year, we almost facilitated 6,000 crores of credit facilitation to the micro and small enterprises. This is for those who do not get anything from the banks. We are there to pitch in, because we borrow on our own strengths and then give it and share it with the micro, small, and medium enterprises. One of the biggest challenges today which our country faces, and especially with the youth which we have, is how to engage them. There are very few jobs, but then we started off with a scheme called Rapid Incubation for Entrepreneurship Development. It's a scheme whereby we put young minds, even not so young ones, and put them through a structured training process in our incubation centers, which are different from the incubation concept which is there world over. We put them on the machines, train them for a period of 3 months, and at the end of the day, we enable them to become entrepreneurs, and we help them in getting the credit to set up their own enterprise. There are several success stories. A small center of ours in Guwahati in the last 3 years has created 450 successful entrepreneurs, people who have now started their own business. They're enjoying business limits. Some of them have come with us to various parts of the world to share and display their products, got orders, and are executing them. This is a model which we have been working with the countries across the world. We worked with the Senegalese military. We worked in Botswana, South Africa, Tanzania, and even on behalf of the government of India in countries like Ethiopia, Rwanda, Burundi, Zimbabwe, Burkina Faso, and others. But then within India, there's a huge demand. We're also trying to work it out with the Indian defense so as to create entrepreneurs out of those ex-servicemen who normally otherwise and go to work as guards in some housing societies or some factories and all that. So this is something which we are creating, and I would urge all of you to avail the services of NSIC in whichever activity you would require it. And I'm sure this country, which is on such a solid footing, with the entire world looking towards us, the role of each one of us as stakeholders is cut out. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this patient hearing.